All right, let's take a lap of the ultimate Tilkodrome, in my opinion, Sochi, which in my opinion is actually a pretty fun track to drive. I understand it's a boring track to watch a race, honestly. This track will reward late turning, and throughout segment two, there's a lot of corners that feel the same, but the braking is really the difference in them. All right, so under the Pirelli Bridge, we're going to look for about the curbs in the 100. You're going to brake just between the two of them. Try to get to the inside curb, kind of thread the needle. Careful over that last left-hand curb. Now here, I like to pull the car in tighter, and get underneath that Pirelli sign. Watch for the car to jump out on you here, but keep it nice and tight. Brake just before that curb under the bridge. And this is a spot where if you're consistently going out wide, turn later. Go into the curbs ahead, brake about 1 second into the curb, turn nice and late, get to the curb, right out to the curb again. You can go about to the middle of the track. There's a caution box ahead that you'll index off of. And notice the trail braking in that last corner. Go back and watch it again. Look at how much I trail braked. Here, brake before the bridge. You brake a little bit before you think you have to. We're going to go about a second into the curbs again. Brake, hard brake, late turn. Keep your eyes to the left side of the track here. You don't need to go to the right for quite a bit. And now up ahead, this is a corner that's going to go into a left curve. So I'm going to brake just after the 150. And keep turning left throughout the curb longer than you think you need to make sure you don't cut that corner. No brakes through here. Just nice modulation of the gas. Notice that I never touched the brake as I made that left. And as soon as I'm straight, brake. It's a very sharp turn. And also over the crest of a hill. Again, no brakes through that section. We're coming up again. It's just going to be a brake in a nice straight line. Late turn. Very, very repetitive track in that sense, but each turn has its own little unique rhythm. All right, now let's get into the turn by turn. If you feel so inclined, leave a like.
All right, let's get through Russia. Turn one is just a bend on the front straight. I mean, just stay within the verge lines. So as we come into what I actually call turn one for my own references, there's a few things we're going to use. There's a sign that's very hard to see right there just underneath the caution light. And I start my braking, it's also hard to see. The curb is just starting to pick up. So between about the beginning of the curb, about halfway between the beginning of the curb and the 100, that's about where I index my braking. Change yours up accordingly. And you're going to hear me say this a lot in this video. I have a very hard time personally finding turn-in marks at this track. I mean, just a lot of the curbs just continue on, and so it's very hard to use here. So if you find yourself consistently going too wide on the exit, then you're going to have to learn how to count a little bit as you're going into the corner, and then learn to turn later. And I think turning later and turning sharper here is going to make you a faster driver. Now, this is one of the very few thread the needle spots around Sochi. You definitely want to get as much of this curb as you can. If you miss it, it's not a disaster. But if you're not fast enough that you end up 2 tires over this curb, then you're probably needing to pick up your pace and carry a little bit more speed through that corner. Do be careful going over this curb. It will upset the balance of the car, so you want to have the wheels straight as you go over this, and if you go back and look at this, you should be able to see a way to make a straight line following Verstappen's path there. You can actually let the car carry out onto the blue, and I like to keep the car a little bit tighter going through yet another turn 8 Turkey, basically, that we're going over. There is a pavement seam. I like to try to get my left side tires to it, but that seam ends partway through the corner. So I like to keep, another thing is just kind of feel a couple car whips off and start pulling it in, and there's 2 things. One is there's a building in the background here, one of the Olympic buildings, and there's also a Rolex advertisement, and I like to get the car under this. And this is tighter than what the AI cars run, and that's fine, except what happens is when you get here, the car likes to jump out there. So as you come off the corner, you have to pinch the car off just a little bit, but these modern F1 cars have so much aero that it's really not that hard to do. And as soon as you get straight, in just a moment, you're going to be right at that bridge, and so there's a few things you can index off of: the bridge, the curbs. I probably start braking right about the bridge. I mean, you're going nearly straightaway like speeds here. And this is another one, like I said in the first turn, not a lot of indicators, just, feel out your rhythm. It's very, very tempting here because the track widens out to try to go for that curb soon. Just use discipline and make yourself stay out here a moment longer. And this is getting very repetitive. Get to that inside curb, But if you keep finding yourself using that excess runoff and you find yourself out here a lot, the problem is you're likely turning too early and you're binding the car up. I do think it's also perfectly fine, if not even necessary, to get 2 tires over here. Now, as we come down the next straightaway, I like to keep 2 tires out on that excess pavement because that way I can actually feel these curbs when they're hard to see. And that way, once I've been into the curbs for about a second, I wouldn't count a 1/1000, but about 1 second into these curbs, brake, and then about a second after I start my braking, I turn. Now, you can also see some marks here in the pavement, but that's very hard to pick up. Another thing you can use here is actually that the wall starts to go away from you on the right side. If I back up a second and show you, right about time that wall goes away, you can also use that to tell yourself this is a good time to turn. But much like the last turn, if you find yourself consistently going wide, turn later. But I don't really have a good way to give you markers for that. This is maybe a little bit too tight getting on that orange curb and all. And this is the one turn here that I was running this on strict track limits, and it seems like at least it will let you pop a little wide here. What's weird is that if you go like just a little bit, and like your right side tires are like in this area, it gets mad and punishes you. But it seemed like with my driving style, maybe I wasn't gaining enough time, but if you end up way over the curb, you're fine. But do watch out because there is a wall to hit right there. And you will, I need to pull back a second, you don't want to get all the way inside. You want to bring the car to about the middle of the track as you go around this little bend in the road shown on the map right there. You don't want to get all the way track right. And what you want to do is make sure that you're not you shouldn't be turning left to set up and get wide in this corner. I index all my braking this time off of that caution box. And to be perfectly honest, I did not even notice this 100 sign until I was actually using this video and making the video. So maybe that's something you could use as well. But I use that caution box. And it's going to be this is where the braking application of Sochi, these 2 corners, and to another degree, the last corner we went through, will really reward trail braking. And what I mean by that is a hard initial application to get a lot of speed off, but then notice how little brake I'm using now. I'm down to less than half brake pedal. I'm going to kind of drag the brake. I'm just going to have a nice slow release. I'm driving on a wheel and pedal set. If you're doing this on a controller, feel it with your finger. Don't just pop your foot or your finger off the brake. Ease your foot off the brake and keep working on that little skill. At the same time, what makes Sochi's rhythm hard is, once again, if you are consistently going wide, you need to turn later. And you might be able to play around with the braking, but I think what's mainly going to be your problem if you're running wide is going to be that turning point. And I hate going over that. I am an advocate of an early turn myself, but that's kind of another discussion. And you definitely want to go 2 over the edges, and you want to have a nice straight line. You notice the wheel is nice and straight, aimed at getting to the right side of the track under that bridge ahead. Now here's another spot where trail braking is very, very crucial. And it's also a spot where you want to trail brake as you go under the bridge, but you do not want to start your turning until you're at least under the bridge and maybe even a little further under the bridge, because it's very, very easy to turn early and be up here. So there again, you want to start your braking before that caution light, and you want to carry your braking in a straight line, maybe not even 100% braking, especially at first. I mean, if you find later you can tighten up the braking, fine, but carry a lighter brake under the bridge and then turn. And then you want to get on this curb, and it's very easy to mess up, and it's also going to be, you want to get back to the gas slowly. Now, this is about all the track you can use on exit. And if you find that you are consistently going wider, you might actually not be turning early, but you might just be not braking enough as well. It's just a very strange corner. It's definitely got Herman Tilke's name written all over it. Now, as we come around that corner, there's a 100, but I don't really use that so much. I use more this curb, which the words are over. You can see the curb starting to paint marks here pretty consistently laid out. And about a second, once I get the car parallel with the curb, I count to 1, I brake really hard, I brake for a second or so, and this is much like the same. Get 2 tires on that curb, and if you're using exit, you need to work on turning later. And I really find this is a track to turn a pinch later than you think you need to pretty consistently. But the good news is that rhythm will not be working out up ahead. I will say you got a long time to get the car to the right. I think a lot of people who spin out here, even though it's not a particularly slow corner, if you just keep your eyes on the left side of the track for a moment until you're off the curb at least, it'll keep you from spinning the car into this wall. Now, a lot of things to use here, because this is another classic Herman Tilke brake zone. It's a little bit like Singapore just before this in the game. So notice there's a few things I index off of. For one, you can see that classic blue and white starting of the paint. There's the curb, which also begins coincidentally with the 150. And up ahead, there's a caution box. And I go just a little bit past the 150, probably like a 135. I don't think it's quite halfway around where I start my braking. But somewhere along in about there is my brake marker. I don't really use this, but you might look at using that as a brake marker as well. The problem is it's going to have your eyes on the wrong side of the track. And the problem is as well is that if you go all the way around this corner and see to 100 before you start braking, you might be too late. So you're going to have to learn how to index a feel between here, here, and using that curve to kind of feel a good brake marker out. Now, if you are consistently cutting this corner, this is one I found myself consistently turning too tight and going over it and putting like 4 tires to the right of it and cutting the corner and getting in trouble with the marshals on strict mode. What I would encourage you to do if you're doing that is you're turning too early, of course, but the trick to making sure you don't do that is to notice that this curve keeps on going around the track into the corner, and it's just very easy to end up straight lining it a little bit earlier and making a diagonal towards that corner rather than following this corner around. This is a classic Tilkedrome characteristic. So try to find, notice I'm 100% braking on ABS here. And so keep the braking going around longer. Notice I just have a ever so slight touch of left-hand wheel in it. I might even need a little bit more than that, honestly. Get to the curb. This little orange curb, this one in particular is evil. The rest of the track, they don't seem to bother you, but this one in particular and the one up ahead will kind of jack you up. You might want to aim to kind of drive at the corner worker station for a moment, but for me, this is a very natural rhythm to carry it out, get it to the track exit. And usually when you have a sacrifice corner like this, you wouldn't do that, but that's what you're going to want to do here. And then bring it back to the middle of the track like Verstappen is. We're going to make a nice little arc. You notice we still have a lot of wheel in the car. We're just going to bring the car to the middle and then cut left. And the key here is, if you go watch this, there's no braking. What we're going to do is we're probably not going to get to wide open throttle. We're going to kind of gas the car up for a moment, and then we're going to ease our foot right back off the gas, maybe even go into no throttle. But if you're using the brakes to make this corner, then it's probably more of an avoidance maneuver than anything. And you just want to bring it right to that curb. And the car is going to very quickly on its own bring itself off that curb if you're driving it remotely hard enough. And the trick to getting wide open throttle around this corner is to keep your eyes looking for the outer band of this curb all the way around. And once you get straight, you're not going to be straight for more than just a moment or so. And there's one thing, is that the curb up ahead starts to come into view. And this is a tricky, tricky corner. This is, to me, the hardest corner on the track. Because, and it is an elevation change here. This is like a curve, and it feels way worse than it looks, which is also a deceptive thing. I mean, especially in the video game world, we have to use our eyes to drive, especially compared to feel and sound, in my opinion. I mean, so it's kind of like that little feeling when you're on a little country road and it's like, wee, as it says on the next slide, as you go over a hill. Well, now the problem is you're going around a very sharp, very slow corner as you make that little wee feeling over a hill. And it's one of the slower corners on the track. So in this particular clip, I turned too early, but you notice this is about my brake marker, and I don't really have a brake zone. Maybe that crane, but honestly, I don't really use it. This is very much momentum for me, and it's to me a lot earlier than it feels necessary. Even when I had the line assist on, this is an earlier brake zone than what you would think you need. I would turn a little later than this. Try to index and try to keep tight until the end of the curb. And that's a trait you can't use at this track most often, because a lot of times at this track, the red and white paint keeps on going forever. But this particular corner, you can index off the end of the curbing. This is just what I was describing earlier. Notice the fact is you can't see the other side of this corner. You're going over a pretty sharp little rise here. I mean, look at Verstappen's car. He's going uphill into the corner. And the problem is right here, the track drops away. And when the track drops away like that, what's happening is the car is going to get light. And the reason you messed this corner up is because you weren't set up for the car to get very light on you. So, and you notice here, no brake, no gas. I've slowed down a lot. 60 miles an hour on an F1 car is very slow. And I'm going to try to keep the car on the left-hand side of the track for quite a while. Honestly, this is about as far right as you want to let the car go. You can keep it a little bit farther left than this if you want to. There's two things you may index off of. For me, it's a lot more just rhythm and feel than it is indexing off markers, but you may want to drive to that box for a moment. You may also want to do something like we did on a turn earlier, and once this inside wall starts to break away from you, then you can turn in. And that is a particularly evil orange curb. But if we can kiss this red and white curb, and the exit curbing, I mean, there's a little bit of room on exit to play, but there's a wall too. So, and it actually will call you out after you hit the wall and give you a time penalty. So as you're going down the next straightaway, I brake just before that caution box. That's about the only marker I can really know to give you here. I mean, the world just looks very much the same here. And this is get on the curb, and if you're consistently running wide, turn later. This is a good track to work on that late apex skill that the HPD instructor in the United States really loves to emphasize with all their might. I think it's critical that you get two tires over this curb. Notice that we are under a bridge. You will use this bridge and probably brake a little bit before the bridge. If you're under this bridge and braking, this corner is going to bite you. Notice it's very sharp on the map. You could be a little tighter here, get to the red and white. The orange is even just fine, but watch out for track limits. And I would say this is the spot I don't really want to use limits, just because if you're out there on the limits, you're going to be snatching the car back on the track to avoid that little patch of grass. So I think just kissing the red and white is fine here, and just be ready to launch it down the straightaway. Keep your eyes looking down the left side of the track because you got plenty of time before you need to go right. So just keep your eyes down the left side of the track and just wait for the car to get accelerated enough that you can upshift. All right, and that's how we're going to get around Russia. Let's take a look at uninterrupted lap.